When the invincible met the impossible, the universe has always had its rulers. Empires that have risen and fallen, species that have dominated and disappeared. In the grand, unspoken hierarchy of the galaxy, power has always belonged to those with the most advanced technology, the most powerful fleets, and the most ruthless efficiency. For centuries, one name stood above all others: the Zarkian Dominion. They were conquerors, warlords of the cosmos, with fleets so massive they could block out a planet's sun. Their warships were masterpieces of destruction, their soldiers genetically enhanced for war, their strategies refined through the experience of 1,000 successful invasions. And yet, humanity had never been conquered. Not for lack of trying. The Dominion had studied Earth, analyzed its defenses, its technology, its weaknesses. Their scientists ran simulations, millions of them, each ending the same way: humanity falling under their rule within weeks. But something about Earth worried them. Every time the Dominion invaded a planet, they encountered the same pattern: fear, surrender, and assimilation. But humans? They had a history of resistance, a history of turning the tides of war when all seemed lost. From primitive warriors toppling mighty empires, to engineers solving problems with solutions no other species would ever consider, humanity had a habit of defying logic. And now, the Dominion was about to learn why. The invasion begins. The Zarkian High Fleet arrived in Earth's orbit like a god descending upon ants. Their ships, sleek and geometric, hung in the sky with an unnatural stillness, bristling with weapons that could tear apart moons. For most species, this would have been the end. Their supreme commander, Salvotek, stood on the bridge of his flagship, arms crossed behind his back, gazing at the blue-green planet below. "Commence planetary suppression," he ordered, his voice sharp and decisive. "Neutralize their defenses." In an instant, the first wave of orbital bombardments began. Cities trembled as power grids flickered. Communication scrambled under the weight of electromagnetic interference. The Dominion expected humanity to panic, to collapse into disarray, to beg for mercy. Instead, the humans did something else entirely. They adapted. Within minutes, ground-based defenses, primitive railguns, and missile platforms, by Zarkian standards, began targeting weak points in the Dominion fleet. They shouldn't have had that data. The only way to identify weak points in an enemy's shielding was to have fought them before. And yet, somehow, the humans were learning in real time. "Curious," Salvotek muttered, narrowing his eyes. "Increase shield harmonization. Deploy ground suppression units." The second wave descended, heavily armed soldiers, genetically perfected for war, clad in shimmering exo-armor. They stormed Earth's cities with unstoppable force, tearing through police, military, and resistance groups alike. At first, everything was going according to plan. Cities fell. Resistance crumbled. And then, they ran into him. The engineer's grudge. There was no record of who he was, not in the Dominion's databases, not in Earth's military archives. No rank, no official position, no leadership title. Just one very, very angry human engineer. His name, Daniel Carter. And his day had been going terribly even before the invasion started. At the time of the attack, Carter was in his small engineering lab in Houston, glaring at a holographic rejection letter glowing in front of him. Application denied. The Zarkian Patent Authority had dismissed his latest technological submission. Again. Their reasoning? Insufficient understanding of fundamental universal principles, which, in less diplomatic terms, meant, "You're too dumb to understand real science." Daniel took a slow sip of his coffee, staring at the rejection message with an expression of pure, focused hatred. For years, he had been developing a revolutionary energy conversion system, one that could have changed the future of interstellar travel, something that could have disrupted the Zarkian energy monopoly. And for years, the Dominion had rejected him, stolen his ideas, buried his work. Now, they were invading his planet, which meant he finally had an excuse. The workshop of spite. While the Zarkian forces spread through Earth, Carter locked himself in his underground workshop, a chaotic maze of half-built machines, modified tech, and blueprints pinned to walls like a mad scientist's conspiracy board. Most people would have fled in terror. Carter. He grabbed a wrench, downed another cup of caffeine, and muttered, "Fine, you want to fight. Let's get stupid." His workshop assistants, an AI named Milo and an aging cat named Gizmo, watched as he started pulling apart everything in sight. His plan: break physics. The Dominion had come expecting warships, nukes, and traditional military tactics. They had countermeasures for every weapon Earth had ever developed. But Carter? He wasn't building a weapon. He was breaking their entire strategy. "All right, listen up, you smug alien bastards," he muttered as he rigged an EMP device out of a broken microwave, a car battery, and some questionable wiring. "You might have quantum shields, energy cannons, and fleets that make Star Wars look like a historical documentary." He grabbed an old toaster and welded something onto it. But you forgot about one very, very important thing. He flipped a switch, and his entire workshop hummed with an eerie, unstable energy. Humans don't fight fair. The first strike. The first sign that something was wrong came when Zarkian command centers began failing across the planet. Systems flickered. Sensors malfunctioned. Communications scrambled. One by one, Zarkian warships lost power. Carter had hijacked their technology, using low-tech, primitive solutions they had never even considered possible. A fleet that could bend spacetime was now crippled by something Carter had built out of spare parts and caffeine-fueled rage. By the time the Dominion realized what was happening, Carter had hacked their tactical AI, feeding it a virus disguised as routine data. One by one, the Zarkian forces lost coordination. And that's when Earth fought back. The moment everything changed. On his flagship, Supreme Commander Salvotek watched in horrified disbelief as his perfect invasion collapsed. "This," he whispered, "this is impossible." Human forces, once overwhelmed, were now pushing back, using their own weapons against them. Their elite soldiers were being outmaneuvered by humans using tactics that defied all logic. And at the center of it all, one human engineer with a grudge. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion faced something they had never prepared for. A war they couldn't predict. An enemy who didn't play by the rules. And a species that, no matter how impossible the odds, would never stop fighting. When physics became a suggestion, the Zarkian Dominion had never lost a war. Their fleets conquered entire civilizations before their enemies even knew what hit them. Their weapons could shatter moons, their AI systems could predict entire battles before they began, and their ground forces were engineered for perfection. And yet, they were losing. Not to an empire. Not to a superior military force. Not even to advanced alien technology. No, they were losing to a human engineer armed with a wrench, duct tape, and a personal vendetta. The unraveling begins. Supreme Commander Salvotek stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the impossible unfold. His holographic battlefield display was a sea of chaos, ships losing power, units vanishing from the grid, battle formations collapsing. The humans were fighting back, using their own technology against them. Status report. Salvotek barked. His second-in-command, Tuvokai, frantically tapped at a control console, his exoskeletal fingers twitching in distress. "My lord, our fleet's neural interface network is experiencing disruptions across multiple sectors. Communications are being jammed by an unknown frequency. Weapon systems are malfunctioning. He hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. We have lost complete control of our planetary suppression units." Salvotek's pupils contracted to slits. "What do you mean, lost control?" Tuvokai swallowed hard. "My lord, they've been hijacked." Silence fell over the bridge. Not one of the Zarkian officers dared to breathe. For the first time in Zarkian history, An invading force had been hacked by a species that still used combustion engines, the engineer's masterstroke. Deep underground, in a workshop of pure spite, Daniel Carter was having the time of his life. All right, let's see what we're working with here. He leaned back in his chair, feet kicked up on a workbench, munching on a half-eaten protein bar while scrolling through the control systems of an entire alien invasion fleet. Dominion war drones, check. Orbital cannons, check. I-command hubs, double check. Their security was flawless for an advanced race, but what they hadn't expected was someone rewiring their protocols using a signal composed entirely of low-tech, outdated communication bursts. The Zarkians had built their entire empire around perfection. Flawless algorithms, quantum computed strategies, impenetrable digital defenses. But humans knew how to break things. And Carter was a specialist in making very advanced things break in very stupid ways. Milo, he said, addressing his workshop AI assistant, what's the status on our little, suggested modifications? The AI's synthesized voice chuckled. All enemy units have been successfully reprogrammed. Also, Supreme Commander Salvotech just tried to issue new orders, but his ships are now responding in an ancient Earth language known as Morse code. Carter grinned. Oh, that's evil. I like it. When soldiers became confused interns, across every battlefield, Zarkian soldiers suddenly found themselves staring at their own weapons in horror. Their exosuits refused to fire, flashing strange error messages in a language none of them could understand. Somewhere in a burning city, a Zarkian lieutenant shouted in frustration. What do these blue screen of D8 mean? Their plasma rifles locked up mid-fire, ejecting their ammo cartridges onto the ground like a petulant toddler throwing a tantrum. Battle mechs, which had once towered over human defenders, suddenly powered down, displaying a smiling cartoon face and the words, "Please insert to continue." Even their ships in orbit were not immune to the chaos. One warship suddenly blasted across the battlefield at ludicrous speeds, its autopilot hijacked. Onboard Zarkian crew members screamed in terror as their ship veered wildly off course, their navigation controls replaced with a single blinking message. You are now playing Mario Kart. Good luck. The rage of the Supreme Commander. Salvotech was losing his mind. His elite, genetically perfected warriors, the pride of the Zarkian Dominion, were now running in circles, desperately trying to figure out how their own technology worked. His billion-credit warships, masterpieces of engineering, had been outmaneuvered by a human using what appeared to be a modified gaming console. And worst of all, the humans were mocking them. A hacked transmission suddenly blasted across the Dominion fleet's emergency channels. A human voice, Daniel Carter's voice, echoed through every Zarkian command deck. Hey there, invaders. How's your day going? The bridge of the Supreme Commander's flagship fell into stunned silence. Carter continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Look, I get it. You came here expecting to steamroll us. Big fleet, fancy weapons, infinite ego. Classic villain move. Salvotech's claws dug into his armrest. Boot, turns out you made a tiny mistake. See, humans, we're a special kind of crazy. Carter's voice dropped to a mock whisper. You ever hear the phrase jury-rigged? Oh, buddy, you're about to experience it firsthand. At that moment, the entire Dominion fleet suffered a catastrophic failure. Power cores overloaded. Shields destabilized. Engines randomly switched directions. Every single warship, every single combat drone, began firing on each other in a beautiful, chaotic symphony of absolute mayhem. And Carter just sat back, took a sip of his coffee, and smiled. The beginning of the end. For the first time in Zarkian history, their greatest war fleet was retreating. Not because they were outgunned, not because they were overpowered, but because they had never faced anything like this before. Humanity hadn't beaten them with weapons. They had beaten them with creativity, audacity, and a complete disregard for the rules of war. The mighty Zarkian Dominion, the so-called apex of intergalactic warfare, had just been defeated by duct tape, outdated software, and a caffeine-addicted engineer with a grudge. And as their ships vanished into the void, Supreme Commander Xalvotek had only one thought: we should have never invaded this planet. When the galaxy learned to fear humanity, a humiliating defeat, the Zarkian Dominion's grand invasion of Earth had collapsed within hours. Not from superior firepower, not from advanced tactics, but from one pissed-off human engineer with a grudge and an unhealthy amount of caffeine in his system. The once mighty Zarkian war fleet, a force that had annihilated empires, subjugated entire species, and conquered worlds without resistance, now found itself in a situation it had never encountered before. It was running away. Supreme Commander Xalvotek, a warlord feared across the galaxy, had no choice but to retreat. His warships, the pinnacle of military engineering, had been hijacked, crippled, and turned into interstellar circus attractions. His elite soldiers, trained in the deadliest combat techniques, had been outmaneuvered by human jury-rigging. And worst of all, the entire galactic community was watching. The broadcast that changed everything. The human resistance had done something no other species had dared. They hacked the Dominion's emergency transmission network, a secure, military-grade system that no one had ever managed to breach. And across the entire galaxy, billions of screens flickered to life with a single video feed. At the center of the frame, sitting in a dimly lit workshop filled with disassembled alien tech, half-eaten food, and coffee cups stacked to dangerous heights, was Daniel Carter, the man responsible for bringing the Zarkian war machine to its knees. He was grinning. "Hey there, Galaxy. Let's talk about today's special event, shall we?" The transmission spread like wildfire. From the towering citadels of the Proximan Federation to the neon-lit trade hubs of the Velari Consortium, beings of every shape and species paused to watch. In the great war chambers of the Galactic Council, leaders of the most powerful empires gathered in stunned silence as Carter continued. "See, a few hours ago, some lovely folks from the Zarkian Dominion decided they'd come down to Earth and help themselves to our planet." He leaned forward, his grin widening. They brought their warships, their mechs, their fancy tech, and their superior intellect. And guess what? We kicked their collective asses using what amounts to scrap metal, outdated software, and pure human spite. The entire galaxy watched, stunned, as footage of Zarkian warships crashing into each other played in the background. Then came images of elite Zarkian soldiers panicking as their weapons refused to fire, followed by the now infamous clip of a Zarkian commander desperately screaming, "What is a blue screen of death?" Laughter erupted across the galaxy. Carter leaned back, stretching. "Now, I know what you're all thinking. But how? The Dominion is unstoppable. No one has ever survived an invasion. What dark sorcery did the humans use?" His smirk turned deadly serious. "It's called problem-solving. And we're really, really good at it." The Galactic Council's panic. The Galactic Council was the governing body of the known universe, an assembly of the most powerful empires, federations, and species ever to exist. They had ruled for thousands of years, their authority absolute. Until now. The humans had just rewritten the rules. Inside the council chambers, chaos erupted. The Velari, a species known for their advanced AI, were in hysterics. The Arakvesh Empire, a warrior race, was in shock. The Proximan Federation, whose entire economy relied on selling advanced technology, was in crisis mode. And the Zarkians. They were seething. Supreme Commander Xalvotek, still recovering from his most humiliating defeat, had been forced to explain himself before the council. "You?" retreated. Ambassador Vorn Talvek of the Proximans asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. Xalvotek's mandibles twitched in fury. "We were outmaneuvered by. He struggled to find the words. By a single engineer, someone from the council helpfully added. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Zalvotek slammed his fist onto the table. Humans, REA 380, to galactic stability, he bellowed. The room fell silent. For the first time, the council realized the true danger of humanity. It wasn't their weapons. It wasn't their numbers. It wasn't even their technology. It was their mindset. They didn't just fight wars. They solved them. They didn't just build technology. They repurposed it in ways no one could predict. And worst of all, they didn't follow the rules. The council immediately convened a crisis meeting. Humanity could not be allowed to rise. The offer that humanity refused. Days later, an official delegation arrived on Earth. Ambassadors from 12 major civilizations, dressed in elaborate robes, armored exosuits, and shimmering energy cloaks, descended onto the planet with one mission: to negotiate. They met in a private chamber, facing Earth's newly unified leaders. At the head of the table sat Daniel Carter. The Council offered membership into the Galactic Union. They offered trade agreements, scientific collaboration, a seat among the most powerful beings in the universe, all in exchange for one thing. Humanity had to promise never to do something like this again. Carter listened, nodding along. Then he smiled. No. The council members blinked. Ambassador Vorn Talvek cleared his throat. I'm sorry. What? No, Carter repeated. Not interested. But we're offering you. Carter stood, stretching. Oh, I know. And it's a nice offer, really. But here's the thing. He gestured outside the window, where human engineers were already reverse engineering captured Zarkian tech. You don't get to dictate our future. We do. Silence. Then Carter chuckled. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to work. I just got my patent for interstellar energy conversion approved. Turns out, when you're not under alien occupation, bureaucracy moves a lot faster. He winked. The delegation left empty-handed, and the rest of the galaxy. They learned to fear humanity that day. Because if humans could do this with scrap metal and caffeine, what could they accomplish when they actually tried? The answer: the universe was about to find out. When humanity went interstellar, the dawn of a new age. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had dictated the fate of the universe. They had expanded, ruled, and crushed anyone who refused to fall in line. Then, in the span of a single invasion, humanity had changed everything. The Zarkian Dominion, the Council's greatest military power, had been humiliated. Their war fleet, crippled. Their elite soldiers, outmaneuvered. And worst of all, the entire galaxy had seen it happen. Now, everything had shifted. No one looked at Earth the same way anymore. What was once considered a backwater world, a civilization barely worth mentioning, was now the most unpredictable force in the galaxy. And the real nightmare: humanity had just gotten started. The Council's final warning. 6 months after the Zarkian invasion failed, the Galactic Council convened in a classified emergency session. The chamber was filled with tension, the kind that only came when galactic superpowers realized they were no longer in control. Supreme Commander Salvotek sat at the head of the table, his pride still burning from the humiliating defeat. We must act now, he growled, his claws digging into the table. If we allow the humans to continue unchecked, they will become a threat to us all. Ambassador Vorn Talvek of the Proximan Federation, normally calm and calculating, nodded grimly. They took down an entire invasion fleet with nothing but scrap metal and ingenuity. What happens when they start building warships of their own? The question sent a chill through the room. For millennia, the Council had operated under one fundamental belief. Superior technology meant superior power. But the humans, they broke that rule. They had no regard for the laws of warfare, no interest in conventional tactics, and worst of all, an insatiable drive to improve. And now, They had access to Zarkian technology. You all saw the reports. Salvotech continued, his mandibles clicking furiously. They have already begun reverse engineering our warships. Their engineers are modifying Dominion weaponry, upgrading it, improving it. He slammed his fist on the table. If we do not contain them, they will become unstoppable. A murmur rippled through the council. Then the Osheri delegate, a species known for their vast information networks, spoke up. There is something else, they said, their glowing, crystalline form flickering with unease. We have intercepted human communications. They have a phrase for what they are doing. The council leaned in. They call it the Great Expansion. Silence. And then, for the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council agreed on something unanimously. Humanity had to be stopped. The Great Expansion begins. The Council's problem. They were already too late. By the time they voted to contain humanity, Earth had already begun its interstellar transformation. For the first time in human history, the nations of Earth were united under a single mission: expand, adapt, survive. Every nation, every company, every research division pooled their knowledge, resources, and technology into a singular purpose. The Hope Initiative, once a makeshift resistance movement, was now humanity's first true spacefaring government. And at the head of it all, Daniel Carter, the man who had crippled an empire with a wrench and Wi-Fi interference, had somehow found himself leading humanity's next evolution. All right, listen up, Carter called out, standing in front of a massive crowd of scientists, engineers, and military leaders. The Zarkians gave us a free crash course in interstellar warfare. And I don't know about you, but I say we return the favor. A cheer erupted from the crowd. He grinned, pointing to the hangar behind him, where the first human-built warship was under construction. You want to know what the problem with alien tech is? Carter asked, pacing the stage. They build perfect, optimized systems, flawless networks that work together seamlessly. He paused. And you know what we do with perfect systems? He held up a screwdriver. We break them, then we make them better. The crowd roared. And thus began the Great Expansion. First contact with the rest of the galaxy. Humanity wasted no time. They salvaged what remained of the Zarkian war fleet. They upgraded stolen alien technology with human modifications. They built new warships from the ground up. Ships designed to fight dirty, adapt quickly, and withstand anything the universe threw at them. And then, they went looking for the other empires. The Villari negotiation incident. The Villari Consortium was the galaxy's largest economic power, a civilization that prided itself on controlling trade, dictating prices, and exploiting lesser species. They assumed humanity would want to negotiate, to join their economy, to become dependent on their supply chains. So they sent an envoy. A delegation of 12 Villari diplomats landed on Earth, expecting to be greeted with awe and reverence. Instead, they were greeted by Daniel Carter, sitting on a pile of alien scrap metal, welding something together. He barely glanced up. "Ah, you must be the Villari guys," he said, wiping grease off his hands. "We were just about to head over to your trade stations and start, acquiring supplies." The head diplomat, a 7-foot-tall, silver-skinned Villari named Kellerax, frowned. "Acquiring?" he asked, voice deep and commanding. "Through trade agreements, I assume." Carter grinned. "Nope." Kellerax blinked. "We control every major trade route in the galaxy," he said. "You have no supply chains of your own. How do you expect to sustain expansion without?" Carter cut him off. "Buddy, we're humans. We don't need supply chains." He gestured behind him, where engineers were breaking apart alien technology and rebuilding it with human improvements. "Give us 6 months, and we'll be manufacturing everything we need ourselves." He leaned forward. "And then, we'll be competing with you." The Villari delegation stood frozen. In all of galactic history, No species had ever threatened them economically. And yet, here was humanity, casually announcing that they were about to outproduce the greatest trade empire in the known universe. Kellerax took a deep breath. "We would like to discuss an alliance." Carter smirked. "Yeah, that's what I thought." The moment the Council knew they had lost, the Galactic Council's worst fears had come true. They couldn't stop humanity. They couldn't contain them. And worst of all, humanity wasn't just growing. They were winning. Because at the end of the day, the galaxy had one fatal flaw. It was built for species that followed the rules. But humanity, they wrote their own. And the rest of the universe was about to learn just how dangerous that was.